I'm a Cantor and Anderson art tour guide, and I'm also a senior studying political anthropology and earth systems. And I'm super excited to walk you through two pieces that I selected today um, for today's art break. So today we're going to be interpreting outdoor sculpture in the context of climate change. So a bit more context on me. Outside of classes and clubs and the daily Stanford hustle, one of the things that I'm really passionate about is climate change and climate change activism. So I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, and worked on zero waste and climate change legislation in the Baltimore City Council. And in college, my family moved to Valdez, Alaska, which is also the site of the 1989 ExxonMobil disaster. So two very different places, but also both being very impacted by climate change and environmental issues. And in Alaska, the Arctic region is being impacted by climate change and rising temperatures at 2 times the rate of the rest of the world, which is pretty concerning. And climate change isn't an isolated issue. For many of us in California, for those zooming in from the Bay Area, we've all been impacted by these wildfires. And especially last year, I remember seeing these pictures of the apocalyptic skies, which may, be something that's personal for a lot of folks on this call. And today I'm going to be talking about 2 outdoor sculptures through the lens of climate change. And what's really interesting about sculptures that are in outdoor locations is that just being outside in the environment influences a person's perception of the piece. And the 2 pieces I'm going to be presenting on, the Gates of Hell and the Sieve of Eros, are 2 pieces that I experienced as a freshman, biking past both on my way to class or to my dorm in the midst of the California wildfires. It was the very first time I'd ever experienced wildfire season, and I just remember like the smoke, like being very acrid and suffocating almost. And I think that really speaks to the timelessness of these 2 pieces, that they're open to interpretation in new contexts, even though certainly like Rodin never, climate change wasn't even part of the vocabulary in the 1880s. So we're going to start off with Rodin's Gates of Hell, which is located directly outside of the Cantor Art Museum. And it was created by Auguste Rodin in 1880. And it was originally commissioned for a museum, and this was supposed to be like the entrance, one of the entrances for the museum. And unfortunately, the place that commissioned the piece never actually emerged, was never actually built for this piece to reside. And so instead, the Gates of Hell remained Rodin's tinkering piece as he worked on it on and off for the remainder of his life for the next 37 years. But it was never actually completed. And Rodin based his piece on Dante's Inferno, which basically describes Dante's rejection of sin and the ultimate acceptance of God as he ventures through the 9 circles of hell underneath the earth. And several bronze casts were actually made of the Gates of Hell, and they can be found all around the globe. And we're incredibly lucky to have one here in the Cantor collection. And I just wanted to say there's a chat box. Please feel free to add questions, comments as I go through this tour. And I'd love to start off by asking you guys, like, what stands out to you from this piece? What is striking? That bit of context. It is very large. Yeah, there's so much going on. It's a very intense piece. Maybe we can take a bit of a closer look at and zoom in. A cross is present, seeming to represent Christianity, dark in color and dark in subject matter. The thinker. What do you mean by dark in subject matter? What makes this piece dark? People are suffering, yeah. The three figures at the top. The concept of hell, writhing, twisting, naked bodies. Yeah, there's a lot of agony in this piece. And biking by this piece, you know, in the midst of the wildfires and all of the media attention on the California wildfires my freshman year, I was thinking a lot about the folks that were being evacuated as I was looking at this piece. And that holds true even now. I was reading a Washington Post article the other day about the wildfires in Greece from this summer, and just the sort of expressions and experiences that folks are having because of climate change and rising temperatures are very much reflected in this piece. And it makes me think a lot about climate change in the context of like human suffering and like what does that mean around the globe. So these images are again from this elderly woman whose home was being burned down in Greece because of the wildfires. And I think this was actually like the headline photo for the article. It's very striking and very vivid, especially thinking about it in the context of Rodin. Yeah, and here are some other zoom-ins of the gates of hell. How do you think these zoom-ins compare to one another? Or like what is striking about them? I think for me, it's again this theme of, you know, agony and almost like feeling trapped. Striving. The emaciated body is striking. Yeah, they're half submerged in the metal. Yeah, struggling to get free. So much dynamism. So many different poses. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Multiple scales of the people. Yeah, they're all different sizes. All struggling to break free. Yeah, no one's working together and everyone's doing something different. Yeah, we're all trying to just survive out here. And it's very difficult unless we all come together, especially in the context of global warming, when, you know, this is a global issue and something that we all need to come together to address, which I think transitions us nicely into our next piece, which is probably less gloom and doom. So if the Cantor is on the Cantor Art Museum is on the exact opposite end of campus from this piece, which is called the Sieve of Eros, which is a mouthful. It was created by Mark D. Suvero in the early 2000s, and it's about 25 feet tall, so it's enormous. Yeah, what stands out to you the most about this piece? What's striking? Striking color, yeah, it's this bright, vivid red. You can't miss it. The simplicity of the lines. You have these enormous straight metal beams just shooting up into the sky. It's angular and severe. Looks unstable. I'd hope not. It's right by a freshman dorm. Folks walk underneath it all the time. Yes, you can walk underneath it. That's right, Joyce. Let's look back to the name. So it's called the Sieve of Eros. What do you think of when you think of a sieve? sorting of sizes. It's a strainer, something that has holes in it. Sorting, refining, picking things out that you want. Yeah, so the Sieve of Eros is actually an algorithm, or like a step-by-step manner in which the user can like sift through all the different numbers and identify prime numbers. And prime numbers are really singularly unique in mathematics. They can only be divided by themselves and one. And this piece, for context, was specifically dedicated to law professor John Merriman for his 80th birthday in 1999, who was this tireless advocate for the intersection of art and law. And Merriman was directly involved in the protecting of the rights of artists, heritage, and art museums through the interpretation of the law. And like D. Suvero, Merriman's work has impacted the opportunities and protections available to those within the art community. And what's really fascinating about De Suvero is that he aims for his sculptures to directly interact with the audience. So this is in front of a freshman dorm, and like someone mentioned earlier, people walk underneath it. Sometimes they put hammocks on it, but you're not supposed to. And this in part was all part of De Suvero's intention. We must experience his work physically and spatially. And in one of the articles about him, he is actually stated as hoping that viewers will climb the beams and ride and push the suspended elements of his sculpture. And for me, this piece, represents like intellectual rigor and deep emotion through like the combination of the bright red color and its, symbolism of the Sieve of Eros. And its location in the busiest part of the Stanford campus is really meant to evoke within students who glimpse it and bike past it on their way to classes that they, like the law school professor to whom the sculpture is dedicated, can create their own unique and singular path from the knowledge that they're equipped with. And in the context of climate change, we have so many different, intersections and ways that we can address this crisis. We have both like the human suffering aspect that I think is really spoken to in Rodin's piece, but also and that can be addressed like through the humanities and the social sciences. But then there's also like this element of like carbon emissions and fossil fuel emissions, and how can we mitigate those through like public policy, for example, or like carbon capture through engineering. And so Stanford, as it stands, is this hub for all this different intellectual pursuits and studies, and we can all come together and sift through like all of our different singularly unique perspectives to arrive at solutions that can help us. Oh, I am so sorry. Yes, you are right. The label is incorrect. Yes, but that can help us all sift through all the different solutions and address them. So this is the sculpture from a different perspective. And yeah, I hope all of you get the chance one day to stop by the Stanford campus and experience these sculptures as they're meant to in the outdoors in all sorts of different environments and contexts. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah, can I tell you guys some more about my work on climate change? Yeah, so some of the stuff that I'm working on now has to do with institutional investment. So both moving money out of investments in the fossil fuel industry and also putting it into communities that have been negatively impacted, that are like facing relocation. And like, what does that look like in terms of like grant funding for relocation efforts? Especially for some communities in Alaska, like Newtok, because of the melting permafrost and the rising sea levels along the coast, their infrastructure is literally being torn apart, and so they have to move. I think that's like one of the main things that I've been working on. I also do a lot of work in sustainable food and getting folks to think about what is regenerative agriculture and how can we build sustainable food systems in a way that like allows for like carbon capture by the soil. What? Thank you, Kate. What brought you to art? I think there are so many incredible sculptures around the Stanford campus, and as an anthropology major as well, it's so interesting to see folks from, you know, different cultures and different societies. Like, what do they value the most about their society, or like what they're feeling at that time, that they devote, you know, hours and hours and hours of work to creating these sculptures or these paintings, and like what makes it significant to them. And I think that's really worthy of study. How have your experiences with art impacted your work on climate? So I actually spend a lot of time sitting in front of the gates of hell, thinking about Stanford and life. And I think for me, I've come to the realization this past year of the importance of thinking about climate change not as like this issue of, you know, like carbon emissions, but more like how can we mitigate human suffering because of climate change, and using that framework to further my work. Yeah, are you a vegan activist? I am not vegan, but I am super conscious of the things that I eat. I'm actually a kitchen manager on campus for one of the cooperative living spaces. So I get to select and pick all of the different produce that the house eats. So for like about 40 people, which is pretty cool. Which departments in Stanford are working on the human impacts of climate change induced disasters? Yeah, so I think the Earth Systems department is not a department, but the EIPER program. Don't ask me what that acronym stands for, but it's like the interdisciplinary PhD program that's offered. And there are folks there that are looking at how like sea level rise and things of that nature, wildfires, typhoons, hurricanes induced by climate change are impacting folks. So it's an intersection of many different areas like anthropology, earth systems, social sciences, and public policy. In your study of anthropology, what have you learned from your readings that can be applied to us and climate change? I think it's that societies are resilient, and you know, we've faced a lot of different issues in our time as a species on this planet, and this is one of the biggest hurdles that we've yet to face. But if we come together, we can tackle it and build community. How can we get people to notice public art? I live right by campus, and most people here, even alumni, have no idea of the art on campus. That is a great question, Amy. I think that's something that's really unique about the outdoor sculptures specifically, because you're forced to see them as you're like biking by or walking by. I know for a lot of my friends, even though I'm a tour guide, you know, they see like going to the museum as an event where they have to like, you know, schedule at the time and like walk through the museum and like enter the space. But what's interesting about outdoor sculptures, like if you wanted to take some of your friends who live right by campus or some of your alumni connections on a walk, like you could point out the art as you go, which is something that I do. Like there's the Papua New Guinea sculpture garden on campus, which was actually created by a Stanford anthropology grad student. And like on my way to like different dorms, I like walk folks through to point out the art to them and like what it means.